Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, Canada's #1 Canadian management podcast, according to Apple and you, the many, many listeners. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Our guest on the show is Cooper Sleeman, part of the brewing dynasty that is the Sleeman family, John Sleeman and Sons Spring Mill Distillery. And we talk about making bespoke ryes and whiskeys and other beverages, keeping up with the elbows-up demand that's been created, making products that Canadian will love and hopefully stick with. Here I have, for those of you who watch on YouTube, there's a bottle of his rye. This is his all-Canadian rye, and it is a delicious product. I also have his bourbon product, which again is fantastic.
Right.
So
I can see you're using the same language as McDonald's. It's a product.
I think I got more
it's not
enthusiasm.
A product. It's a drink, man. Come on.
It is a delicious drink. It was super fun to hear how the family kind of, their perspectives around the evolution of the market, where he thought opportunities lay for the family and the industry here. And you knew, or you've met John Sleeman. I hadn't had his dad. I hadn't had the opportunity. You knew John, though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did live in Guelph once and ran into him a couple of times, but actually had dinner with him a few years ago after he sold Sleeman's Breweries to Sapporo. And I was actually asked to keynote an event hosted by Sapporo, and of course he was there. And we were having dinner just right in front of each other in Niagara, at Niagara on the Lake. And that's when he told me that the distillery business is very different than the beer business. And Cooper will actually mention a few things about that during his talk.
Now, speaking of alcoholic beverages, mixologist, my daughter made me a wonderful cocktail with this rye with a little amaretto. So I'm very fond of it now. You and I were together here in Toronto this week.
That's
just
right.
A couple of days ago. We met up at the RC show. You were on the stage. Then we walked the show. So what's the verdict? I mean, it's a new location.
Yep.
New perspective. Change is hard. And traffic is always a problem for these places, and parking and all that stuff. But what was your impression?
Yeah, I know a lot of people made comments about that for sure. I do focus on the content. I focus on what's actually happening and where the needle is moving and trends and stuff like that. And of course, I felt that the facility was really incredible. 1,400 exhibitors. The place was buzzing. I was actually there on Monday, and it was packed. You were there. We were both walking the floor. It was packed.
Yeah, we couldn't walk 10 feet without somebody
I know.
you or I knew, or both of us knew, and chitting and chatting. It was great.
Absolutely. And like everyone knows what's going on in food service. It's not easy. But still people show up at these shows. They're confident, they're resilient. You gotta love that attitude for sure. But the one thing, a couple of comments I've heard time and time again, talking to different folks on the floor was, menus have to be redesigned. They have to be simplified. The menu has to reflect the establishment's core competency. Instead of pleasing everyone, we can't afford to please anyone anymore. Let's focus on a couple of main dishes, whether it's beef or pork or veal or whatever, and basically design the menu around that. And that's what I heard a lot this week compared to past years. It was, plant-based came in and, we need to accommodate them. And gluten-free came in, we got to accommodate them. But now I think restaurant operators are saying, you know what, let's actually focus on things we're good at and let others worry about other things.
Well, and speaking of focus, you and I went on a fun pizza crawl, so to speak. I've been bragging about the...
I didn't know that they existed. I heard of beer crawls or pub crawls, but pizza crawls, that would be a first for me.
Well, and we went to two amazing places, Pizza Baliati, and that was... you waited in line, which is...
you need to know where it is. I mean, seriously, without you... I wouldn't have found it. Like, it's in the middle of a normal neighborhood, for goodness sake. And the guys probably sleep upstairs.
Yeah, it's a great pizza. Great. I think you described it as the best thin crust pizza you ever had, though you're not a huge thin crust pizza guy.
Absolutely. I'm not a thin crust person, but I have to say there's something with that crust that really makes me, wow, I could go again if I, if I like going out with people that like thin crust. I think that's a disgrace to pizza, personally. but honestly, it was a great experience overall, for sure. Yeah.
Well, and then we went to a place called Bar Sugo, which is talk about focus, right? It's what's known in the trade as a red sauce restaurant, pastas and pizzas. There's a picture of you by their great people. Like, the people were so nice and cool and friendly.
Can I use a word in Jerry Maguire, the movie? They got me at hello. I mean, as soon as you walk in, you smell the oven. I mean, how can you not want pizza? Seriously, it was delicious.
Well, and I could say it was fantastic pizza. So if it's on Bloor Street in Toronto, anybody look it up. We'll put a link, and there's a couple of pictures of us there. So we had a great time. It's always great.
I must say, it was the first time. It was the first time I went out with someone to eat pizza, and we only ate a slice and brought back the whole thing, like almost the whole thing, plus spaghetti. You ordered spaghetti.
I ordered a giant mountain of spaghetti. I heard it's been so good. I took a couple of bites, then had them wrap it up. It's in the fridge here, and the same thing. Order a couple of big pizzas. And it's all eaten
by now, I suppose.
The pizza's gone. The pasta's for Friday night, so none of it goes to waste. Anyway, shout out to Bar Sugo. Yeah, it was. Now, speaking of food, while you were here in Toronto, you went to McDonald's, so to speak. Talk about that.
The McDonald's. Have you ever been to the head office of McDonald's?
I have not.
So first of all, the address is One McDonald's Place. So it's hard to miss. You walk in and it's basically, so of course you have security, but once you pass security, it's basically a McDonald's.
That's great.
And whenever you meet someone at McDonald's at an office, that's where you meet them. It was my third time there. So I met the president and CEO, Anne-Marie Swinstink, and she was incredible. We talked about a variety of different things. I won't go into the details because obviously there were some things that we discussed that we can't disclose, but she will be on our
background,
podcast.
As journalists would say, on background. Yeah.
On background. And so we talked about the success of the $5 campaign, which was launched in January. We talked about labor. We talked about some of the issues that she's seeing with GLP-1s. It came up actually quite a bit, in fact. And so lots of discussions around different topics, and it was great. And she accepted our invitation to come on the Food Professor podcast.
Hey, it's fantastic. That's fantastic. A welcome addition to the pod. And
well, here's the thing about Anne-Marie. I mean, she's from the Netherlands, and frankly, when she got to Canada, she did learn a lot of things like supply management, and she basically went, "What the hell is that?
What is this? What is this?"
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, she works with all of these trade groups, and she needs to get along, and I think she's getting along, working the supply chain quite well. So yeah, kudos to her. I mean, it's within months she basically decided to launched this very aggressive promotional campaign, $1 for coffee and $5 for Make Value meals for an entire year.
Yeah, that coffee thing's making big waves, I'm sure, because their coffee's good, right? They got a good cup of coffee.
Guess what I had when I met her? Coffee.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah,
got a good cup of coffee. All right, well, that's wonderful news. That we'll look forward to having her join us in a future episode. Let's get to the news. So let's start in Iran. Of course, it's a different week, different context. There's chaos in the Strait of Hormuz. I was looking at some of these headlines. It's like apocalyptic. 10,000 ships, crew stranded. Biggest jump in diesel in 32 years. The Navy, U.S. Navy, says it's too dangerous for them to escort. Now, I did. So we've got this up and down. Gas, diesel up, gasoline up, down. You're releasing strategic reserves. Now, I did get in touch with a special guest, an expert in the dynamics of price value equation of a barrel of oil. So we know that sometimes when price of oil goes up, there's benefits out there, right? You think about pipelines and you think about Alberta. So let me bring on Tommy Norris from the great TV series Landman and hear what he has to say.
You want oil to live above 60, but below 90. And don't get me wrong, we're still printing money at 90, but gas gets up over $3.50 a gallon, it starts to pinch. It hits 100, every product in America has to readjust its price. $78 a barrel, that's about perfect. It brings enough profit to keep exploring, but it don't sting as much at the pump.
There you go. Thank you, Tommy. Yep. And of course, the lead character on the great series, Landman. And I'm wearing all Tecovas product today. I'm a big fan of the Western wear. And everybody on Landman is wearing Tecovas, their boots and hats. There's my hat and my shirt. Anyway, so it's a really interesting dynamic.
But I think he's right. I mean, there is a sweet spot for oil prices, and for food, I would say it's probably 65 to 75.
Right.
It's enough to move things around. It's not too expensive to force the industry to adjust prices. Right now, I mean, what I'm concerned about is that you have a White House playing with the price of oil. I mean, because
daily, hourly, almost.
President, you can tell that President Trump is trying to influence the price of oil because it will influence his popularity, and that's not exactly how you win a war. One and two. I mean, they've decided to engage. They've decided to attack Iran, and I think the last thing they should be thinking about or doing is to influence the price of oil. Really, I mean, I think that everything that's going on right now was supposed to happen should Iran be attacked. And so I don't think anybody's actually surprised by what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz. But at the same time, I mean, you just can't, because the market will actually see some fundamentals and then you hear other voices telling a different story. And that's why the market is just going up and down and up and down. And that's even worse. That's even worse than seeing a market gradually going up.
Right, unpredictability.
So if you have freight to carry, okay, and you call your transport company, and the transport company has no idea how things going to cost tomorrow or the next day, they're going to charge you more.
Sure,
no matter what.
Well,
so that's why this up and down thing that we've seen the last few days is really killing transportation, killing the food industry. It needs to stop. It's much better to see a gradual increase than seeing these ups and downs.
Well, I wanted to hone in on one thing, and that's potash. And it's planting season around the world. And we saw some of this disruption when, Russia invaded Ukraine. And we were quite concerned about that. Now, from a fertilizer perspective, I think Canada's in a pretty good place for our own domestic use. Does this actually help the province of Saskatchewan? They've been getting some wins. They got some uranium sales to India. Now, I hate to describe this as a win, but is there something, if you could confirm that we're in pretty good shape around fertilizer because we've got a domestic supply, and B, that, this could, at the end of the day, be a net positive for the province of Saskatchewan and Canada exports? Well,
for royalties, for sure. I mean, all fertilizers are more expensive, but don't forget, we don't produce all fertilizers in Canada. We still need some sulfur, some ora coming, and a lot of it comes through the Strait of Hormuz. And so farmers are still nervous. If you're farming a farm with, say, 3,000 acres, you could potentially see your costs of inputs go up by anywhere between $50,000 to $150,000.
Wow!
For a price taker, that's a lot of money. And so,
how long does this have to go on? I guess this is the hard question for anybody to answer. But it's only been a week or 10 days. How long does this disruption have to continue? Now, already people are saying, "Listen, you lost a week in the Strait of Hormuz. You'll never catch up. It'll take a year to catch up." But do you have a perspective around how much is too much?
Well, so for fertilizers, it's really happening at the worst time for North America, as you know, and for the Northern Hemisphere. For our farmers if they haven't locked in their fertilizer purchases for 2-3 years, they're going to be paying more. In fact, the increase is so significant, even if you locked in your prices, you may get actually a phone call from your supplier saying, you know what, there's going to be a surcharge because of what's happening. So because there's a bit of a double whammy there. There's fertilizer prices, and you got to get the fertilizer to the farm. So transportation, oil, and diesel. So that's
the cost of diesel. Yeah.
So that's really the problem with fertilizer. So it doesn't really matter how long the war will take. It has lasted long enough to really impact farmers. Now, oil For consumers, that's a different story. So if we see a sustained increase of oil, that is going to hurt consumers. So the ratio we came up with at the lab is pretty simple. For every 25% increase in the price of oil, sustained over at least 5 to 6 weeks, that's an extra $150 to $200 for a family of four for the entire year to feed itself. Okay. And since January 7th, okay, oil has gone up almost 70%. So
do the math.
It's almost $450 to $600 for a family of four on average for entire to feed itself. Wow. So so we're actually, I would say, probably a few weeks away from seeing contracts being rewritten, contracts being renegotiated with new terms, unfortunately. And that's going to impact everyone. And of course, we did talk about it last week. Guess what happens?
1st, around the corner.
Fool's Day. April Fool's Day, the carbon tax is increasing. Many Canadians don't know that the carbon tax is still there for consumption and for the supply chain. The only difference, the only thing that changed last year was Mr. Carney decided to bring that tax, that consumer tax, down to zero. It is still there. Now, the industrial tax is at $95 a metric ton. It's going up to $110. When Ukraine happened in 2022, 4 years ago, the carbon tax was at $70. Very different times. So that's why at 110, you're likely to see a compounding effect being much more vicious towards retail prices than what we saw in 2022.
So we can only hope that Prime Minister Carney's take the world as it is philosophy extends to, hey, you know what? Canadians are getting pinched. They're going to get pinched. It's not if anymore.
I've always said, I'm not necessarily against the carbon tax, but for the food industry, stakes are pretty high. Either pause it or eliminate it for the food supply chain. I think that would be the best thing.
Well, I heard, Trump every minute is saying something different. He's spinning ideas. One of his ideas was take the tax away from gasoline so it doesn't hurt so much consumers at the pump. I mean, there's lots of levers to pull as a government. So, I think it'll be interesting days and we'll be staying right on top of that issue. Now, I want to stick with the U.S. for a little bit and a follow-up to a discussion we had about President Trump ordering the mandatory production of Roundup or glyphosate. It turns out...
Glyphosate.
Glyphosate. What did I say?
Glyphosate.
Glyphosate. Ollie Mel.
we all have these words in our head we can't pronounce. So
anyway,
Ollie Mel and glyphosate are two of yours.
Anyway, you all know what I'm talking about. So it turns out that there was a military purpose to this. Who knew? But their special forces use that product that I cannot pronounce as phosphate, white phosphate for smoke and for other things. So there was a military purpose for it. So if it goes away, there's no easy substitute. So anyway, just a kind of a, I don't know what that is, a fun factoid or whatever.
It's a fun fact, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But just interesting.
Different purpose. It does. It makes you wonder why we use it for food. But anyways, yeah, absolutely.
There's that. There's an article that I was reading in CNN. I'm on CNN more often.
If it's CNN, it must be true.
Well, they do a pretty good job of reporting on what's happening right now.
They do. Actually, I listen to CNN a lot more these days because they're a little bit more balanced. So they're not like Fox. I think Fox lost it a little bit. They're a little bit too arrogant.
Yeah. Well, I like CNN when there's action happening because they're good at that. When there's no action happening, they just make stuff up to talk about, I think. They don't make stuff. They don't make up the news, but they're like, what are we going to talk about? There's nothing interesting happening in the world. Exactly. They are at their best, when there's a crisis like this. Now, the article was about forever chemicals on fruit. Yeah. Apparently 40% of all fruit coming out of America has not just pesticides, because, I wash my fruit and I tend to pick when you think about lemons and all these things that are, they must be good for it. No point in getting organic lemons. I mean, what's the point? But it turns out that there's PFASs, which is these forever chemicals that are, unwashable off the fruit. Have you heard of this? And what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, there's several studies that come out every once in a while. you end up looking at the study that has a questionable sample design. It doesn't necessarily look at the entire industry. It will pick and choose certain samples to make a compelling argument. And I'm not suggesting this is the case, but I've every now and then, every 6 months or so, you have this one study saying we're eating poison or the industry's poisoning you. And here's why. And I've always been a little skeptical because typically you do see flaws in the sample design. I mean, they'll just look at one lot or a couple of lots, and they'll say, you know what? And this is what happened with glyphosate. Actually, with a study in France, they actually they had rats eat glyphosate, really, and they developed cancer. But I think it was 9 rats or 10 rats. It was one of the most dubious studies that I've seen in the last 50 years, but it was cited over and over and over again, saying, "Oh my God, glyphosate will give you cancer." No, it won't, because you basically just use glyphosate like steroids on these rats to make sure that they would actually die. So, and to make a point, basically, because the researcher was fundamentally convinced that something is wrong. So there's a lot of advocates out there in research, and you just want to be a little bit careful. Now, again, I don't want to discredit this research because I haven't really read it, but there's a lot of research out there claiming certain things without really a thorough investigation. My advice to our listeners is to look for meta-analysis. So meta-analysis will actually grab some of these studies, but we'll also look at other studies as well, and will give you an overall perspective on risks related to a specific topic, like glyphosate, like, for example, in this case, residues on fruits and vegetables and things like that.
All right, good advice there for the people. Let's shift gears a little bit back into coffee. We've been talking about coffee a little bit. Have you ever been to a Blue Bottle Cafe? The only one I knew of. I'd seen it in New York and Hudson Yards. There was a Blue Bottle Cafe. I didn't know much about it. And in the long list of things I don't know that comes up all the time, it was actually owned by Nestle. Had you heard of Blue Bottle? Did you know Nestle? Did you know Nestle owned them?
Well, I did actually. So, Nestle owns a lot of things.
Yeah, as it turns out, yeah.
Yeah, and it's starting to sell a lot of things too, by the way, like their ice cream division in Canada. But yeah, no, I knew it, but I've never been to a cafe like that, no.
Well, it's a more upscale. Now, the news here is that they bought that not too long ago, and they bought it, I think, I'm going to make up some numbers that are directionally correct, about 425 million. And they just sold it for about 400 million. So they kind of took a little bit of a haircut or didn't make any money on it to Luckin, which is the Chinese-owned kind of cheap and cheerful coffee shop that are popping up.
Interesting.
They're now the number one coffee in China, and they're popping up all over New York. I went into one. It's like cheap and cheerful. And so I guess this is them being Luckin, having kind of a high-low to kind of set off from. Anyway, so, Nestle getting out of the business. And
very quickly, how does it look when you walk into some of these cafes? What do you see? Like, what's different?
It's like a very, very nice Starbucks, the brand Blue Bottle. I mean, when I first looked at it, I thought it was just a bottled water retailer or restaurant. Like, it doesn't jump off as a coffee place.
And they've got it's not in the name. Yeah,
it's not in the name, but they've got some really nice locations, some standalone locations that are really nice, very upscale. And I hear their coffee's really good. So I think but at the end of the day, Nestle didn't make any money from it.
Yeah, they're a CPG, and they I think they're good at that. Retail. It's complicated, and like to compete against Starbucks and on execution and things like that, it's probably a little bit more complicated for sure.
Well, there's an espresso location in New York. There's a new one that they opened up. It's really fabulous. So they really nailed it. So it's not like they don't have retail entirely figured out, but in this case, time to go, put all their chips in one. Pushed as they would say on Landman, they're pushing their chips to the center of the table.
But the Nespresso stores, they sell you the machine, right? They sell you the experience, but you can actually leave and you can actually make your own espresso at home. They empower you to actually make your own coffee at home, correct?
Yeah, but that's not their big feature. Their big feature is enjoy how great the coffee is. Like that's definitely, like many places have stuff or things for sale. It's definitely secondary. The experience is primary.
Yeah.
You're waiting for George Clooney or to walk around and tap you on the shoulder and offer you a beverage, or Brad Pitt. Yep,
that's right. Yeah, exactly.
Right. A couple of handsome fellas. I'm a big fan of George Clooney. And my favorite George Clooney movie is The American.
Who doesn't like George Clooney?
You ever see the movie The American?
Who doesn't like Brad Pitt?
Well, they're both great actors, and I like their stuff. But if you're into spaghetti westerns, The American is a fantastic spaghetti western genre of a movie. So check it out.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my POV.
I think Penelope Cruz was actually in some of those ads as well.
All right. Well, let's take a break. Let's get to our fantastic interview with Cooper Sleeman, and let's hear all about the Cooper's Rye and all about the bespoke spirits business in Canada.
So we have the pleasure to have as our special guest this week Cooper Sleeman of Spring Mill Distillery. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. So great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us more about Spring Mill Distillery, its history, your products that you have, and how did you decide to actually, start a distillery in the first place?
Looking back, it's an interesting story. It's one that's got quite a bit of length in terms of the family heritage. Our listeners may or may not know my father started Sleeman Breweries here in Guelph, Ontario in 1988. And previous to that, as early as 1834.
Yikes. Wow.
Yeah.
Sixth generation.
That's right. Yeah.
Wow.
So very lucky to be able to continue to work in this industry. It's a fun industry. And, Sapporo purchased Sleeman Breweries in 2006. And it was right around that time that my dad, was unsure of what his responsibilities would be at the brewery, given that large acquisition and the transition phase there. And so he and I and my brother Quinn and we all, and my mom too, we all enjoy good whiskey. And we've always enjoyed the stories that accompany a good whiskey. It was around 2010 where my dad had the idea of starting a distillery. And the key differentiator for the distillery was trying to make world-class spirits that you can find around the world, but all here made in Canada. So make, a beautiful bourbon-style whiskey that you would typically find in the States. Make a beautiful single malt whiskey like what you'd find in Scotland, or an Irish-style blend, and obviously some Canadian rye. That was the intention from the beginning. And then, the cool thing is shortly after we decide we're going to start a distillery and really put everything we have into it, we find out that in 1836, John H. Sleeman, who started the original Sleeman Breweries, but 2 years later in 1836, he started Spring Mill Distillery. And we didn't even know that as a family.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's kind of a full circle moment.
Wow. So do you feel the pressure, being a sixth generation, dealing with a sixth generation legacy, do you feel the pressure a little bit carrying the Sleeman name? Because Sleeman is so famous. It's well known.
There's definitely pressures to execute. Mm-hmm. It's also an absolute privilege. I don't know any differently, right? I was born into the family and
always been a Sleeman. Always been
right. Our conversations from as early as I can remember around the dining room table were always about the industry and the family business. And, so it's not, but to answer your question, yes, there's pressure for sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
With the, what's going on in the US right now, has that actually had an impact on your decisions to launch, to sell? I'm sure you're keeping a close eye on what's going on in the US right now, I'm sure.
Yeah, there's always factors that you need to take into account, whether it be, the US-Canadian relationships right now, but also just the general consumption trends, the way people are consuming. They're all factors. The Buy Canadian movement that has really kind of taken over in the last year has definitely helped our business. We've been, making a bourbon style spirit for 6 years. Because again, it's part of our core path to success is making beautiful whiskeys from around the world, but all here in Canada.
Right.
And so, yeah, our traditional straight whiskey is our bourbon style whiskey. And the reason I called it that is because I didn't want to get sued, right? Because bourbon, if you're going to use that naming,
that's right,
has to be made in the United States, right?
Yeah.
So no, we've seen a tremendous uptick. The only challenge is that in this business, unlike beer, right? Like if you guys had said to me, hey, Cooper, I need 10,000 cases of beer and I need it in April, 2 months from now, a month from now, whatever, I'd say no problem. I can make that happen. Not because of the size of the brewery, but because of the turnaround time from grain to actual finished.
You can
goods.
respond quickly, yeah.
Right. Whereas in the distilled world, especially with whiskey, I'm digging into inventories that we made 5 years ago and I only made so much, right? So it's completely different.
So in terms of your commercial launch, could you tell us more about where you're at right now? How you feel about, getting your product to market and things like that?
Yeah, there's every province is a little bit different. And so we pride ourselves in being able to stretch our reach across the country. And that's been a goal for the last 2 years, is to try and get at least one of our products into each province so that, we can continue to invest in those markets. So I think the only province we have left that we haven't gotten into is Newfoundland and Labrador. But other than that, we're kind of across the country. And in terms of timing, these things, especially when you're dealing with liquor boards, they take time, right? You need to apply. There's, typically far more applicants than what is actually approved to be put on the shelf. And so, when you're dealing with private stores in some of the areas, I know Nova Scotia has a handful of private stores, and then, Alberta and BC both have private stores. That's a whole different, way of route to market is completely different. But what's interesting is to distinguish yourself from everybody else, you need to invest money in telling your story, especially when we're dealing with such a saturated market, right? So it's kind of a long process. Typically, from application to on a shelf, if you're approved, it's anywhere from 6 to 9 months, and that's kind of across the board.
You've given me a whole bunch of great segues into our next kind of set of questions. But I off mic, I was telling you I tried some of your delicious beverage, the Cooper's Rye, picked up at my local LCBO, and my daughter made a wonderful cocktail with it. So congratulations. It is a really great, really, really great product. So whoever, I wanted the most all-Canadian beverage to talk about on the show.
Well, you definitely got it. And one of the things that's interesting about the Cooper's Rye, and I almost wish I didn't call it that, because everyone thinks I named it after myself.
Yeah. Well, that's why I got it. We're talking to the guy named Cooper. Let's get his rye.
Yeah, but it's not my rye. It's actually for my brother. So my brother is a Cooper by trade. He makes Canadian white oak barrels that we age a 100% rye in. It's a very long process of, procuring the wood. Quinn goes out and picks the trees and cuts the trees. And you can't just cut a tree down and turn it into a barrel the next day. You actually have to get it seasoned.
I would expect not.
Right. You need to let it, sit outside in the rain and the snow for a year and a half. Once you've already cut the wood into board length to expose the grain. And so, the intention with that was to be the most Canadian you can possibly be. And so we've got a 100% Canadian kid, my brother, with 100% rye, Canadian rye, in a 100% Canadian white oak barrel that's made by him.
Wow. Talk about backward integrating. Eh? So there you go. Like all the way back into making the barrels. Well, congratulations. It's 100% delicious. So if anybody's a rye fan,
thank you.
I definitely encourage that. So we left off talking about, your distribution, your go-to-market strategies, which differ a little bit, whether you're talking to private sector or public sector. I definitely think my perception is, and Sylvain and I have talked about this in the pod, that the U.S. product coming off the shelf is certainly a tailwind for brands like yours. And it feels like one of those things that just engages trial, right? Like as a new brand, as any brand, you just got to get somebody to try your product. And, this is the best way for them to understand it. So whether this lasts or not, it's been a wonderful trial period. But as you think about, okay, now you're competing, as you said, there's less room on the shelf than for all the new brands. So how do you set yourself apart? You started talking about telling story. Sometimes people buy the story before they buy the brand. You certainly have a name that's at least locally known, locally in Ontario, but probably nationally. So talk about that. When you go to market, what's the best foot forward in all these conversations for you?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And to go back on your first statement about trial, people like what they like. When I go to Subway, for instance, for a sandwich, I get the same sandwich every time because I know I like it. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't want to be disappointed by trial. So yes, this Buy Canadian movement has forced trial. And what's a real blessing is people are liking what they're seeing. They're going, oh, well, I can't get that bourbon, or I can't get that, American California red wine, right? I'm going to try something local. And they go, oh, wow, I actually like it, because now their hand is forced. So how do you capitalize on that? At its core, you need to have a good product, right?
Right.
That's what's going to get you your repeat. And to be honest, that's what set us apart from a lot of the competition. And I certainly don't mean to degrade the competition. The nice thing about this industry on the spirit side is, Canadian craft producers, we're all kind of in this together, so it's not a hostile competition. Which is a nice change of pace coming from the beer world.
Oh, yeah. This is pretty cutthroat, right? I mean, but it must take you and your dad back to the early days of craft beer.
Absolutely,
craft
yeah.
Beer brewing, right?
Yeah, and I think it's nice to be able to look back at those times and relate to it, because when we really think about it, those were really difficult days too. It has not been easy here, and the reason being is, in terms of investment in a new distillery in Canada, we're it in the last 30 years.
Wow.
So we really jumped in with 2 feet here to try and that's what we're hoping will be the differentiator. And again, it goes back to, you can't start a business without thinking, how am I going to be different?
Sure.
Right. So the idea from the beginning was, how are we going to be different? And it was, again, and it was back actually to our personal taste. We love drinking beautiful Irish, Scotch or Irish blends and single malt scotches, right? We also love a really nice bourbon. We love Canadian rye. And we thought, why is there no one in Canada that's making these different varieties all under one house?
Interesting. Now, could you talk to broader trends in your sector? So we talk about the trend that is a decreased consumption of alcohol, but we also talk about where we're hearing the premiumization to craft. That kind of bifurcation. I'm buying cheap and cheerful, or I'm buying really bespoke. Not much in between. Is that what you're seeing? Talk about the trends in your sector.
Yeah, the trends it's what we've learned in the last 20 years is that the trends are now moving faster than they ever have. We typically look to the US market and know that we're going to be a couple of years behind them. And, at one point, especially in the beer business, we were about 8 or 10 years behind the movements that you'd see out of the States.
Wow.
Now we're much, it's a much shorter time frame. The decisions people are making about their consumptions are influenced heavily by, social media presences, which, are driving a health conscious consumption, right? So as much as sometimes it might be less is more, but low carb, low cal consumption continues to kind of withstand the trends, right? Like we look back and the perfect case example is Bud Light Lime, right? All of a sudden Bud Light, like everyone was like, you can't have lime in your beer, like artificially put in there. And then it was everywhere. And then a year later, you couldn't find it anywhere, right? You look at the seltzer movement, with White Claw driving that. And then, now it's quite saturated, that market, but the consumption is still there. Right. It's just, there's more options for people. Right.
Yeah,
so it's
ready to drink is a big thing in your sector. Exactly. RTD. Do you see that sticking around?
Absolutely. I would say yes. And it's the convenience factor, right? Like then there's also the container format that's changing. So people are not, drinking out of bottles anymore. They're all cans because they're easier. And it's looking ahead, monitoring the environment, to try and put your best foot forward. I mean, we have an RTD lineup here, We've got a ginger and lime mule that does quite well for us across the country. And then we've entered into that low carb, low cal with a watermelon mint vodka soda that's only got 1 gram of sugar. And the idea there is that when these consumption trends change, you want people to still bluntly put money in your pocket instead of somebody else's. A good example of this is our brewery business. And I think I'll probably get the date wrong, but I want to say it's 1996 or 1998. My father purchased the rights for Stroh's Canada, which is Pabst Blue Ribbon, Old Milwaukee, Colt 45, Schlitz.
The beers you bring to a party, and because nobody else has got them, and you don't spend a lot of money on them, right? Those are budget brews that have a bit of a brand to them, though, right?
Right, and it's got the reliability of a brand that you recognize, so you're avoiding that trial issue, right? Yeah. But what ultimately happened there was, instead of again, a good example is the 2008 economic recession. So prior to that, in Alberta, we couldn't make enough honey brown for that market. And then once the economic crisis happened, people didn't drink less. They just spent less money on drinking. And if anything, they actually drank more. But
in volume,
yes. Yeah. But instead of them buying somebody else's value beer, they changed from Sleeman and were drinking Pabst Blue Ribbon.
Yeah.
And then that allows for your company to essentially be recession proof.
Right. Now let's a last question for me in this section, and then I'll pass the mic to Sylvain. You sell directly. Talk about the role of direct to consumer in the mix of how you go to market for a bit.
You need to find a way to get your product into somebody's hand, and you need to be able to get it into the hands of people quite easily, because it's not hard to put your whiskey on a shelf and have people shop it that want to shop around and enjoy picking up the bottles, looking at it, doing the touchy-feely, reading about it. Those people are easier to get a hold of because they enjoy the process of shopping for your product. There's not enough of those people to pay your bills. So you need to find a way to make it easy, right? So because we're here in Ontario, our distilleries here in Ontario, we are allowed to direct deliver to people's homes. We're allowed to, as long as they're not a bar or restaurant, right? But we still can deliver to bars and restaurants, just a little bit more of a legal process, right? Making sure all the paperwork's good there. And then we have a retail store at our distillery here where people can come in and, do the touchy-feely and learn a little bit more about our product. But making your product accessible is one of the most important parts of running a business like this. Because if you're not accessible, then you have a real problem, right?
Talk to us more about your facility on site where people can actually go and physically visit and try your products. I know where it is approximately. I've never been there since you've started, but could you describe what you have there?
Yeah, so we're on the banks of the Speed River, which is a river that winds its way through Guelph, and we're pretty much right downtown.
It's a beautiful place.
Thank you. Yeah. We discovered this place because it has ties to my great-great-grandfather when he was smuggling with Al Capone. They found the illicit old holding tanks for smuggling.
Great.
And so we had plans. We had already, planned out a different facility, a new purpose build on the 401, kind of in between Guelph and Cambridge. Again, that decision was made because think about how many people are driving by your facility every day on that highway.
My goodness. Right? Oh, yeah.
But we couldn't turn away from the fact that right around the same time that we were about to put a shovel in the ground there, they discovered these tanks in this old abandoned building downtown Guelph. And we went to check it out. And I just thought we were looking at it because it was cool. But my dad, we came out of this trap door in the floor and he was like, we're building our distillery here. And I thought he was crazy because, the walls had collapsed in, there was spray paint and needles and stuff everywhere.
Yeah. Actually, that's probably when it was about the time when I actually had dinner with your father, John Sleeman, in Niagara Falls. He was telling me that story. So fascinating.
Right. And it works well because of what I was talking about earlier, that there's a story there, right? And which is not related to the liquid quality at all. It's just a fun story, right?
Exactly.
if you've got that part, now you need to actually focus in on the liquid quality. And so my dad has a very simple saying. He says he expects nothing less than the best. When that mentality is applied to what we're trying to do, which is deliver world-class whiskeys, well, then our master distiller, Don Bellman, who worked for and with my father at the brewery for, 30 years before he signed on to this project, his response was quite simple. He's like, well, John, if you want the best liquid, then we need the best equipment. Because we feel that we have the best grains in the world here in Canada. We are rich with, as Canadians, rich with fabulous grains. So that's a check mark there. We can find the right people. We certainly have the right people. And then now what we need is the best equipment. So it took us a long time. It took us about 1.5 years. And by us, I mean my dad. 1.5 years to convince Richard Forsyth, who's, I believe, fourth generation, still maker in Scotland, to make the stills for us here. So we were successful in getting them. It was a little tricky, and we have wooden washbacks. As far as we're concerned, the only wooden washbacks being used to ferment a single malt in all of North America are here. But again, if we're going to make a single malt and we want it to be like a Scottish style single malt, well, we better have the same vessels that they would use there. We tried every step of the way to get the best equipment we possibly can. And I completely understand that that's a privilege, right?
Yep.
And then that relates back to the pressure conversation from earlier about getting it right. When you've checked all those boxes and before you've launched, it's then, okay, well, how are we going to tell the story using marketing? How are we going to deploy the sales team to make sure that they're talking to the right people? It has to be check all the way down for this whole kind of symphony orchestra to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll ask one last question before I send it back to Michael to close things off. Any international opportunities you have in mind right now with your products?
Yeah, I think the international market is very interesting because we've always been viewed as Canadian, fabulous. Not we, being Canadians, are sought after for our rye whiskey production. Right? There's more. From my understanding, there's more Crown Royal consumed in the state of Texas than there is in the entire country of Canada. So export is an important part of growing this business. The challenge that we have is, we need to lay down a lot of money in whiskey in order to feed those markets. And because it's a whiskey-based business and we're authentic in being grain to glass, that's a lot of money you need to lay down to feed these other markets. So it's almost like you need to have success and become EBITDA positive and growing for your local market before you can explore external markets. The Asian markets are always interested in global whiskeys. That would be an interesting place to go. The European market is also interested in global whiskeys. Again, you need to make sure that you've kind of got your yard in order before you start looking at the neighbor's property, so to speak.
Right. That's a good way to put it. Last question for you. What's the future? I'm on your site and I see lots of very different things, some limited time releases. Like I see some vodka. So what's the future here? Is it a line extensions? Is it going into different things? Is it just anchoring on a few? Like, where are you going to put your last minute of time and dollar of budget? What's next for you guys in the future?
Well, we've identified that there's some really good opportunities for us to continue to have our single casks whiskeys that we have, the ones that we hand select or we do unique finishes on, and continue to tell our story that way. So we're constantly innovating in that department. Short-term success for us is to become a break-even business, right? Because again, if you think of the growth chart for whiskey, in order for you to have more whiskey to sell in the future, you need to actually lay down more than you're selling today.
Sure.
Constantly.
It's a big bet, right? You got to make a pretty big bet. Yeah,
exactly. And so, and that's where we get back into the diversifying your portfolio, right? So how can we leverage this building to drive some more revenue in? How can we have different product launches to continue to drive revenue in so that we can continue to lay whiskey for growth? So that's the short-term look. I mean, we are almost a profitable business, but we aren't quite yet. We've made leaps and bounds over the last 7 years, but the first 7 years have been very difficult, right? COVID, economic issues.
Sure.
LCBO and different liquor board strikes. It's been a challenging couple of years.
Yeah, out in BC.
Slowed down in BC this year. Yeah, that's right. The long-term look for us is to have a well-rounded, profitable business, and single casks help. They tell that story. We won best single cask in all of Canada at the National Whiskey Awards this year for our red wine aged single malt.
And I imagine you got to get into the restaurant trade too. Right? You've touched on the restaurant trade, but we're not just talking about the consumer trade. To get that volume in, right, as well.
To get the volume and also drive trial, right? Like people go like, oh, okay, I'll spend $10 on a cocktail or a 1 ounce, dram at a restaurant before I'll spend $50 on a bottle at the LCBO or a different liquor board, right? So that helps drive trial. But when all the bars and restaurants are closed during COVID, that's hard. Right?
That's hard. That's hard. You got some opportunity this year. We got some sporting events that should drive trial. And listen, you got a fantastic product. And just for the listeners, you mentioned an American style bourbon. I think that's your traditional straight whiskey. Is that your bourbon product? Just so we know what to look for on the shelves. Right.
Yes, it is. We have two bourbon styles. We have our traditional straight, and then we have a high rye bourbon, which again, high rye straight whiskey is what it's called. We call it high rye bourbon here, but publicly, it's called high rye straight whiskey, because if it was made in the United States, it would be a high rye bourbon. That match bill, it follows all the same rules. So,
all right. Well, Cooper, listen, thanks so much for joining Sylvain and I on the mic. Fascinating to hear the story. What a history. What a Canadian story. What heritage. And but you're making great product, but a lot of great product on the shelf. And good luck in standing out. It sounds like you're doing all the great things, and we wish you all the best. Congratulations on what you've been able to accomplish to the team, and we wish you all the best in what comes next.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time.
Good luck.
All right, we're back. There's an ambitious experiment, if I can call it that was happening in Calgary and in Alberta. Loca Quality Market, and these were really nice stores. They're in Edmonton, Calgary.
Have you been to one?
I have not. I'd only seen pictures of it.
Once.
What did you think?
Impressive. Yeah. Like you didn't feel in Canada. Like seriously, like you felt like you were in posh Europe, like in Austria, somewhere in the mountains, and you just forget about where you were. Really, it was so good. I mean, you actually entered the store, and even though your intent was just to look around, you had to buy something. Yeah, because you wanted to eat something. It was really nicely done. Great design, lots of glass everywhere, very clean.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was so. I was very, very sad when I heard that they were closing.
Better luck next time, I guess we could say. Now, like speaking of better luck next time, Calgary Co-op has been in the news. I'm a big fan of the Calgary Co-op business.
Yeah,
they opened up.
We had the CEO on our show a few years ago.
The former CEO. He did his turn and he's moved on, and they opened up a really nice mixed use location with apartments on top. But they've also sold a couple of locations. Talk about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, there were two that actually closed, and so Sobeys saw an opportunity. Great locations. Those stores were not profitable, but Calgary Co-op has actually been criticized for not keeping up with the market. Really, it offers some benefits to members, of course, but prices weren't competitive, and so I think that Sobeys wants to turn things around, convert these stores into Freshcos, and offer and open up 2 more discount stores in the Calgary area. So which is needed. I mean, on the one side you have some specialty stores closing, on the other more discount stores. It's happening everywhere in Canada, and I did say in early 2026 that trend will continue.
Last couple of things. Congratulations, I guess, are in order to TikTok. They got the ability or the go-ahead to stay open in Canada, kind of open their offices again. As you know, in the United States, the TikTok business in some way, shape, or form was sold to a bunch of people, Larry Ellison and team, notwithstanding the fact that Congress had ruled them illegal. Those things don't seem to matter much anymore. But TikTok is undoubtedly a big influence in the food business.
Immense.
It is
immense.
There's there's great creators on there. I'm not, as you can tell, not fussed about the business. I guess we've given them a lot to think about because they've said we'll open up, but we'll be more careful around what we serve up to children and all that stuff.
Well, in 2025, if you look at the top 3 products that have seen the most growth in unit sales, well, cottage cheese is one of them. And guess what is behind? Absolutely.
Yep. No, its influence is undeniable, and that's the root of my problem with it. Their influence is undeniable, and also very easy to put the thumb on the scale, depending on who's running that scale.
Yeah.
They could be a lot more responsible, as all the platforms could, in terms of what and how they are. And they only preach responsibility when the knife's at their throat. So I think it's good to kind of hold them accountable, shut them down for a little bit, and open them up again. To all the creators and lots of people who make money off TikTok in Canada. So off we go. Now let's shift over to Maple Leaf. Things, looking at the results, things are going pretty good. And now we talked about, and we had the Maple Leaf president on last year on the pod, and they had spun off their pork division. Yeah. What they call it, Canada Packers, right? Which I kind of love that kind of heritage brand, but it seems a good thing.
They went back to basics. So they basically downsized their plant-based division. They actually got rid of the pork division. It seems to be working for them. So they know, we saw that during the Olympics. It's a protein company of Canada. Mm-hmm. And to a certain extent, it's true. I mean, they actually do well. They do very well with protein. And I think that their new structure makes more sense. I think it speaks to their strengths basically, and they're able to work the supply chain very well, very strategically.
Great
with
company.
with some verticals, and with their new plants in Canada, Hamilton and London being the newest ones, state of the art. They can actually do very well and remain competitive.
Well, congratulations to them, and we wish them much continued success. Right place, right time, with the right people behind it and the right strategy. Just because you're in the right place at the right time, a lot has to fall in place and to make these things work. So congratulations to all the people at Maple Leaf who keep food on their table. So thank you all for doing that. All right, that's a wrap on this show. I'm Michael LeBlanc, media entrepreneur, and you are?
I'm the food professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Safe travels, everybody. And by the way, I hope everybody enjoyed our new music off the top. We're going to have some new music coming out as well. So I hope you all enjoy that.
Excellent. Take care.